Alvaro Obregon was born February 19, 1880, in a town called Palabampo, Sonora. In his town, most people recognized him as a town genius because he had a near photographic memory. He was very hardworking and intelligent growing up. Even though he ended up dropping out of school to help at home, he continued on teaching himself subjects such as photography and carpentry. As a teenager, Obregon was exposed to the early days of the revolution, which people held against him later on in his presidency. In 1912, Obregon became a supporter of the newly elected president Francisco I. Madero, and when an old general and ex-supporter of Madero turned his back and launched a revolt against Madero, Obregon willingly volunteered to join the Maderista forces. Within weeks of joining the revolution, Obregon displayed excellent signs of military genius. Obregon was quickly promoted through the ranks and attained the rank of colonel before he had considered resigning and going back to his civilian life in December of 1912. In the War of 1912, Obregon had recruited his own 300 soldiers for his regiment. He was very well respected, so much so that his respect was needed for any successful presidency at the time. Before he could decide to resign, the Madero regime was overthrown and Victoriano Huerta assumed presidency. By now, Obregon had become the most important military figure to fight for Madero. After he was overthrown, Obregon immediately offered his services to the government of Sonora in opposition to the Huerta regime. General Carranza had gained the title as Primer Jefe, or First Head, of the newly proclaimed Constitutional Army, and immediately he made the decision of appointing Obregon as his commander-in-chief. Obregon and Carranza developed a sort of alliance together. Their alliance went on to defeat a majority of major warlords, including Victoriano Huerta, Emiliano Zapata, and Pancho Villa, before they disintegrated in 1920. In 1917, the new constitution was ratified, and Carranza was made president. During their alliance, the two had agreed, Obregon and Carranza, that when Carranza was elected to become president, he would choose Obregon as his successor. But because Carranza began to view Obregon as a threat to his re-election, Carranza chose to make Ignacio Bonilla as his successor instead. After this unfortunate event, Alvaro Obregon officially announced his plans to run for president in 1920. Carranza ultimately led the people of Mexico to look down on him for trying to organize an unfair election. Carranza, realizing that he had no chance at winning the election, ordered his men to lead an attack on Obregon. Unfortunately, a former supporter of Carranza, who now was an ally of Obregon, attacked and killed Carranza, putting an end to any attempted attack on Obregon. During his presidency, Obregon instituted the first major land reform and public education system. Obregon also instituted Jose Vasconcelos as Secretary of Education. Because of new laws concerning land ownership in the Constitution of 1917, American businessmen who had investments in Mexico's land were angered, and U.S. President Woodrow Wilson denied Obregon recognition. Obregon undertook negotiations with the U.S. and resolved the conflict in 1923. He also built the national oil industry, attempting to revive the economy. As president, the only people he oppressed was the Catholic Church, whose rights he restricted in favor of a more secular country. This would later inspire his assassination by a Catholic fanatic just before he is placed into office again. After his presidency, Obregon put his support into Plutarco Calles. Calles ran against Adolfo de la Huerta. Obregon and Calles' military defeated de la Huerta, and he was exiled to the U.S. Obregon decided to run again for president in 1927. But while he had support from the military, he had lost support from the general public and intellectuals. His two opponents were Arnulfo Gomez and Francisco Serrano, who together plotted to have him arrested. In July of 1928, a Catholic man named Jose de Leon Toro shot Obregon 5 times in the head, which killed him at a banquet in Obregon's honor. Toro was executed shortly after. After Obregon's assassination, the government entered an era known as Maximoto. During this era from 1928 to 1934, the 3 presidents of Mexico, Gil, Rubio, and Rodriguez, were controlled by the previous president, Calles, who called himself Jefe Maximo. In 1936, Cardenas realized Calles' intentions of control and had Calles exiled to San Antonio, Texas on April 9th of 1936. Cardenas' presidency is said to have been the best in a long time. He cut his own salary and instituted land reform, which the public had been waiting for a while. Cardenas also nationalized the oil industry in hopes of pulling out of some of Mexico's huge debt from previous presidents.